What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and as you know, I have been reviewing every single film that was nominated for Best Picture at this year's Oscars. My original goal was to get all of the reviews out before the actual ceremony, but I'm a freshman in college, it's my second semester in film school, time got away from me, and I just wasn't able to do that. But I am still going to be talking about every single one of these movies, because I fucking love talking about movies, and as a channel that talks about movies, I feel obligated to talk about all of these movies. And today we are going to be reviewing Poor Things, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos and starring Emma Stone. Based on the novel by Alistair Gray, Poor Things tells the story of Bella Baxter, a woman who is resurrected by a rather unorthodox scientist using the brain of what was her unborn child. And this film follows Bella as she learns what it means to be alive through the body of a grown woman, but the mind of an infant. So going into this movie, I had really high hopes. I love Emma Stone as an actress. I also loved the visual aesthetics of all of the marketing. It felt very unique, and I had actually never seen a film from Yorgos Lanthimos before, but I was aware of his filmography and the general discussion around it, and I've been meaning to watch his movies, I just haven't gotten around to it. But I was very much anticipating this movie because of the type of filmmaker that I would hear people describe him as. You know, very fearless, very against the grain, not very mainstream, very out of the box, weird, wacky, not afraid to go certain places. As a massive supporter of art and artists taking massive risks, that was a big point of anticipation for me with this one. And also, as I said, I just fucking love Emma Stone as an actress. Emma Stone has to be one of those actresses. Look, obviously everybody has haters, but I feel like Emma Stone is one of those actresses that probably has like the least amount of haters. Like, I've never spoken to someone who doesn't love Emma Stone, online or in person. I was also intrigued by the story that this film was going to tell. I was not aware of the book that this is based on. I was simply intrigued by the idea behind this movie, just like a sort of twist on the old classic Frankenstein tale, mixing it in with a bunch of other genres such as comedy and drama and romance and thriller in here and horror as well. This is very much a clusterfuck, for lack of a better term, of all genres. All this to say, I had high hopes for this one, so did it live up to it? Well, as you know, with my reviews, we always start with the negatives, because I always prefer to end on a positive when it comes to film and filmmaking, so let's get into my negatives first. My first negative with this movie is that the pacing I found did drag from time to time. I don't feel like the movie is consistently interesting at certain plot points, and at times it does feel like it's meandering a little bit, kind of feels like it gets lost in itself a little bit. Also, given the nature of the story and this very unorthodox approach to a coming-of-age film with Emma Stone's character having the mind of a child but the body of an adult, there is a lot of exploration of sexuality in the film. In fact, I would say that that's the story of the film. The vast majority of the story, I would say, is dedicated to Bella Baxter learning about her body, how her body works, and sexuality, and different power dynamics in society when it comes to sexuality. I would definitely say that that's the main focus of the film, and I think most people would agree. And while I love that this film goes there, and while I love that it has the guts to explore that very taboo subject matter in such a graphic way, which we'll talk about later, it did kind of rub me the wrong way a little bit. I don't think the film has ill intent whatsoever. I never got a vibe that anyone working on the movie or telling the story was a creep, for lack of a better term, but it's just controversial subject matter by default. And I feel weird faulting the movie for it because it is the point of the movie, and it's also one of my biggest positives with the movie. It's one of the most praiseworthy aspects of it. I just can't help but feel that while I was watching it, I can't help this, I just naturally felt a little uneasy about it, and I'm certain that that was the point at certain points in the film, but there's a few scenes where I don't know if it needed to be as graphic as it was. There's a few scenes in here that feel a little pornographic to me. It kind of gave me Game of Thrones vibes, where like it's a similar thing too, where most of the time in Game of Thrones, it feels warranted for the story. It doesn't feel like it detracts from it at all. It feels a little unnecessary, but not too unnecessary. But then there's some scenes where it's like, okay, you're literally just doing this just to please the audience. In Game of Thrones, it's a little more bearable because vast majority of there's a lot of taboos in there, but a lot of the time it's just two consenting adults who aren't related doing what they want to do. But with this movie, yes, she has the body of a grown woman, but it's the mind of a child. And the movie is acknowledging that, and that's the point of the movie, and it is exploring the fucked up nature of that. But at the same time, you're still very graphically showing this character who has the mind of a child doing a bunch of crazy shit. And I don't know. Given the way the plot progresses and the points that the movie is making, I'm not as turned off by it as a lot of other people are, I am sure. It doesn't piss me off as much as I'm sure it has a lot of other people. I just can't help but feel, just in me being honest in this review, as I was watching the movie, I just naturally wasn't too comfortable with some of how they portrayed that. But that honestly wraps it up for my negatives, so let's go ahead and get into the positives with this movie because there are a lot. First of all, you've heard it in every single review, and it is true. This movie is visually unreal. Every aspect of the visuals here, whether it be the practical stuff with the costume design, the production design, makeup and hairstyling and all of that stuff, and the more technical aspects of it like the cinematography, the color grading, the CGI that is implemented within the film also worked extremely well. The color palette is so vibrant and so pleasing on the eyes. It truly is such a beautiful rendition of this world that they're attempting to build with this film, of which they do so very, very well, by the way. This does not feel like a world that I've ever seen depicted on screen before. It feels wholly unique to this film and this story, and I love that. Okay, now I have to talk about the performances in this movie. The elephant in the room, of course, being that there's one specific actor in this movie who may or may not have won Best Actress at the Oscars recently. I'm not sure I've heard of her before, though. The little-known actress, I think her name is Emma Stone. Yeah, she plays the lead character in this movie. She was okay, I guess, you know, she was fine. All jokes aside, very well deserved. She is, I know that's not the win that a lot of people were expecting, but I don't think anybody is upset that she won because you watch this movie and yeah, her work in this film is completely astonishing. I don't really think I've ever seen another actress do this kind of thing with a character before, or even go to these great of lengths when it comes to embodying a character. The only one that really comes to mind is everything Rooney Mara did to play Elizabeth Salander in David Fincher's version of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. She is completely fearless in this movie, Emma Stone is. She does things that as an actor, I don't know if I could ever bring myself to do. Mark Ruffalo is also a standout in this movie as one of the supporting characters, who is also kind of a lead character in a lot of ways. I found him absolutely hilarious. He perfectly embodied the archetype of the type of man that he is playing. And I also just love seeing him in this really weird, detached from the mainstream movie after he sort of just got thrown on the conveyor belt of the Marvel train for the past decade. Now, despite this movie being super fucked up with its subject matter and also just like genuinely like a lot of the things that it's exploring, it's also surprisingly fucking hilarious. And it's not unintentional. There's a lot of intentional comedy in this movie that almost always lands. There's a couple lines in here that are so absurd and out of pocket that are just so fucking funny. Particularly one scene involving a baby in a public place. That probably got the biggest laugh out of me. It's certainly a very dark and very twisted sense of humor employed throughout this movie, but if anyone who knows me knows that that is absolutely my type of humor. I love very dark, twisted humor that's very relentless, and this movie treads that line quite beautifully, I would say. On the more serious end of things, though, this film does have very clear messages that it communicates quite explicitly, but it never feels forced or preachy, which is surprising because there are lines in this movie that they're not even metaphors. They're just straight up like stating the themes of the movie and the social commentary that it's going for. And I actually found it very effective, and I feel like a lot of that does have to go to the fact that with the character of Bella Baxter, she is learning all of this stuff through the eyes of a child, and children tend to see the world in a much more black and white lens. Obviously, black and white perspectives on things can be very damaging the vast majority of the time, but when it comes to certain things, and particularly the themes being explored in this movie and the points that this movie is making, I do feel like this is one of those rare instances where a black and white perspective actually greatly benefits the messages of the movie. I also found the movie completely unpredictable. I don't know if this was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. I'm pretty sure it was. Regardless, it is an incredible screenplay, and I couldn't predict any plot point in this movie whatsoever, any major plot point. Obviously, there's little mini events that happen within certain scenes and certain moments in the film that obviously you can see coming, but that's literally how every movie to ever exist is. So, I don't know, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to criticize the movie Poor Things for being a movie? Because I'm not going to do that. Now, this film, as I've already mentioned, and I'm going to hit it home once more, is rated R. And it is extremely graphic. And when I say it's rated R, I mean it's rated R. Like, it earns that R rating. I'm certain they had to cut certain things to avoid getting the NC-17, and I would say that this even pushes the boundaries of what can be shown in R-rated movies. I said in my negative section that sometimes I think it goes just a little too far, but for the most part, I actually found most of it to be very tasteful and artful and artistic, and I found that a lot of it did serve the story and the narrative of the film, and vast majority of the time I don't feel like it took away much from the movie at all. There's actually some very clever ways in which they use nudity in the movie to get their point across that I actually found quite effective, because despite the fact that this movie is mainly exploring sexuality, a lot of the nudity is desexualized in certain ways. But there are other scenes where they do, like, sexualize the nudity a lot, like it's shot in a way for it to be more provocative, I guess. There's moments in the movie where they do that, like they depict the nudity in that way directly after a scene that depicted it in the exact opposite way with the same characters. I thought that was a pretty clever way to get certain points across. It's also just the general point of, I like that this movie takes risks, I like that it wasn't scared to go there, and I know it doesn't work for everybody, sometimes it doesn't work for me, but props to the movie for going there. I also think the final act of this movie is genuine perfection. It has some really satisfying payoffs and an absolutely pitch perfect ending. I could not think of a better way for this story and these characters' arcs to end. It was very good payoff, very satisfying, couldn't have been better. So guys, in conclusion, Poor Things is an absurd, hilarious, demented, and somehow deeply powerful film that communicates its messages clearly and effectively, and it's completely unique in every sense of the word. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Be sure to let me know what you thought of Poor Things down in the comment section below. I would love to hear all of your takes. Also, be sure to check out my podcast titled the Headspace Podcast, now available on all podcast streaming platforms where you prefer to stream, most namely Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's also on Amazon Music, Samsung Podcast, Podcast Index, RSS.com, anywhere you want to stream, like I said. I recently did episode 4 of that podcast with a very close friend of mine. Her name is Kendall Jackson. I had her on as a guest to discuss the film Leave the World Behind. It is a behemoth of an episode, but it was so much fun, and I think we had a very good discussion, so please do check it out if that interests you. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you want to go the extra mile, consider turning on bell notifications so you get notified every time I upload new content. Guys, thank you so much, as always, for watching. I will see you in the next video, and until then, keep writing, keep shooting, and keep editing.